Day 1 of 4 of increasingly hard coin flip problems. I worked as a quant, and basic interview questions filter out over 90% of candidates, and this one only takes a coin. What's the expected number of times you have to flip this fair coin in order to see 3 heads in a row? This is a great warm-up, and I'm going to start this problem by introducing 4 states, where state 0 is that we haven't flipped any heads yet, state 1 is that we only flipped 1 head beforehand, state 2 is that we flipped 2 heads beforehand, and state 3 is when we flipped 3 heads beforehand. Next, I want to introduce the variable en, and en is the number of coin flips it takes to go from state n to state 3. For example, E0 will be the number of flips it takes to go from not having flipped any heads yet to having flipped 3 heads in a row, and that's a number that we're looking for. And this is how I'll set up the equation. When we start at state 0, there's a 50% chance that we will flip a heads, in which case we'll progress on to state 1, and there's also a 50% chance that we flip a tails, in which case we'll remain in state 0. And therefore, E0 equals 0.5 times E1 plus 0.5 times E0. And I add a plus 1 at the end because transitioning to one of these states requires 1 coin flip. Then next up, we're in state 1, and likewise, there's a 50% chance that I flip a heads, in which case I transition to state 2, but there's also a 50% chance I flip a tails, in which case I restart and go back to state 0. And I add a plus 1 in there to represent that it takes another coin flip in order to do the state transition. This sets up the equation of E1 equals 0.5 times E2 plus 0.5 times E0 plus 1. Then I do this again for E2, and notice that E3 in this case should represent 0 because at that point we already flipped 3 heads in a row and we don't have to flip anymore. So I plug in the value of E3 equals 0 into our equation for E2, and I get that E2 should be equal to 0.5 times E0 plus 1. Then I plug in that formula for E2 into our formula for E1, simplify it with algebra, like so, and we get that E1 is equal to 0.75 E0 plus 1.5. Then finally we plug that into our formula for E0, simplify with algebra, and again, then we multiply both sides by 8 to get our final answer that we expect to have to flip a coin 14 times in order to see 3 heads in a row. Follow to see how hard the questions the next 3 days will be.